Okay, so welcome everybody to the Town of Richmond informational session on elevations and buyouts. My name is Josh Arneson. I'm the town manager, and I'd like to thank Lynn Caroleo for organizing this meeting and helping to run the program for the Town of Richmond. As we get into these applications, everybody I think who's here has got a pre-application submitted at the end of August. And now the next step is the actual application. And I understand there's lots of questions from the applicants about what are my next steps? How do I choose which step to do next? And the way the process usually works is you ask Lynn, who's been running the program. She knows some of the answers and provides that back to you. The other answer she doesn't know, she goes to the state, gets those answers and comes back. So we decided rather than trying to do a number of one-on-ones as we're heading in towards final application stage, let's do an informational session so that the state can present information on next steps. Everybody can get that all at once, and then you can all ask a lot of questions here tonight. We are also recording this meeting, so if there's people that aren't able to make it, we'll have it on a recording. We'll post it on the MMC TV website, which is where all of our town meetings are posted. And we'll put a link on our website, and we'll email that out to all of the residents as well. So you can also come back to this meeting and find the information there. We are asking anybody to sign in, just put your name and address so we sort of know who's here for our own records. If you're joining us online, if you could just type in the chat your name and your street address, that'll help Lynn keep track of who's been in attendance for this meeting and could be helpful just as we sort of like understand who's got what information. From the state, I'd like to thank Stephanie Smith and Matt Hand, who are here in person. They'll be speaking to the buyout program. And joining us online, we have Brian Eberhardt and Mandeep Gota, who will be helping us out with the elevation portion. So you said maybe elevation is going to go first?
It doesn't matter to me. Is there interest in the room in one versus the other, or do we have interest in both? Who's looking at buyouts?
I'm elevation.
Elevation.
Buyout.
Okay. It doesn't matter to me
Okay.
which one starts if we have both.
Either one is fine. So why don't we start? We'll start online with Brian.
You know, I will say that my sister Martha is attending this and that she has to cut out early. So if we could do buyout first, that'd be helpful.
Okay.
Any objections to starting with buyout?
All right.
Okay, we'll start with buyout. So I'll turn it over to Stephanie and Matt.
All right. Thank you very much. So hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I manage our hazard mitigation program for the state. Matt on my team here. And thank you for introducing Brian and Mandeep. They'll mostly go on the next set. I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for being here. I mostly don't want to talk at you. I want to be able to give a quick overview of the buyout side of things and then really see what your questions are. I don't know how much you know already. You've at least gotten through the initial expressing interest with the town phase at this point, but I want to make sure that I can answer any lingering questions that you have. So the first couple of things that I'll start with, which is just the base setting, make sure we're all on the same page, are that this is a voluntary program. So it's voluntary for the town. It's voluntary for the property owner to decide to want to do a buyout. The only thing that makes it sort of involuntary is if you have a substantial damage determination. If you have that determination from local zoning, which means you have significant damage to your structure in one of the recent floods, you are required to meet the flood policy within your community, which means either elevating or doing a buyout. So applying for the grant, completely voluntary. That's the only thing that sort of makes it a little involuntary, that you have to do at least one of these two. So I just want to make sure we're all on the same page about that piece. And then the biggest question we always get is around valuation. So who's determining what my property is valued? So I want to level set on that too. So the state is doing a new thing since last July, which is a state managed buyout program. We're currently in the process of hiring appraisers. So these are qualified appraisers. Like if you went out, hired someone to do an appraisal to figure out the value you were going to sell your house at. It's the same process. It's not the town assessed value. It's a full market appraisal. And if you flooded in one of the recent events and you apply under the current funding rounds, it's a day before the storm value. Yes.
So that's the whole property or just the house itself?
The whole property.
Day before the storm, 2023, right?
Yes, so the current funding round is if you flooded before. So if you flooded in 24, but not 23, it could still be the day before that storm. That's fine. You just can't go back. So if you wait a couple years, apply under a later funding round, you can't get that day before the storm anymore. So just want to make sure that's clear. then it would be a current market. And if you didn't flood, it could be a current market now.
And is the substantial damage determination required to
No.
participate in the buyout?
No, it is not required. You can still apply. It's easier if you are in the special flood hazard area because we have to show FEMA that it's cost effective. And that's one of the easiest ways to do that is if we can show that it's in FEMA's mapped special flood hazard area. Or if you have damages. Yeah. go ahead.
So regarding the special flood hazard area, everyone who we've received, or at least on the buyout side of things, everyone who we've received interest from is in that special flood hazard area. So we don't have to worry about the other workarounds regarding that.
Okay, just about the market value the day before, there were 3 floods in the last 12 months.
Yes.
So the market value the day before, which of them?
So the first one was July 23 before that one. So any floods since, in terms of the value for the buyout, it doesn't matter. I know it matters to you guys greatly. It doesn't matter for the buyout value. It's the day before the July 23 flood, regardless of anything that's happened since. The caveat I want to make, and then we'll come back to you. The one thing I want to note is there is a duplication of benefits requirement for FEMA. So if you received a flood insurance payment, individual assistance, if you received some sort of funding to fix your structure, that funding, either you have to be able to show receipts that you used it to fix your structure, or it gets subtracted out of the value that you're offered, or somewhere in between. If you use some of it to fix your structure, we can credit that back to you. The intent is if you go out and buy a Hummer, then you don't get that back. That's FEMA's intent. So they're saying, we already gave you this money, now we'll give you the rest.
I just have a question about that specifically. So the net insurance money that I got, it was allocated for certain items. I had a really high deductible for my in-basement things, but was given money for my garage. I used most of that money because I didn't get any money for the furnace and stuff like that. I used most of that money to pay for the functional utilities, electrical panels, things of that nature. Is FEMA gonna break down? Did you spend, okay, so as long as it was spent on getting the house up and going and livable.
On repairs, yep.
Okay.
So how much damage, how much did you receive, and how much did you use for repairs? That's what we're looking at, and it's the state looking at all of your receipts to make that determination. Yeah.
So I was given some money by FEMA. I forget the exact name of the category, but it was for basic house stuff.
Okay.
But it was, in order to use that money, you had to guarantee that you're gonna have flood insurance on the house. Now, if I'm doing a buyout, then obviously that's not gonna happen, so.
Right, then the structure has been mitigated because the property is gone. So I think that I'm not aware of that caveat in much detail, but I would think it would go away with the buyout.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and anything it has to be specifically to fix your structure. If you got rental assistance, that doesn't count because that's not to fix your structure. Some of the businesses in particular get contents insurance, or some property owners can get contents insurance as well. That doesn't count because we're not buying your contents, we're buying the structure. So anything related to the value of the structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is Mary here. This may be a surprise to you, but when I was flooded and I had the federal flood insurance, it took about 3 years for the buyout, but I still had to carry flood insurance because that was a requirement of the mortgage that I was still paying on the property. Because if you don't continue to cover it, even though they hadn't paid a nickel yet, had I not paid the flood insurance, the house would have been taken by the bank. So if anyone here has a mortgage, be aware that you have to have that. And my flood insurance went up to $3,500, even though they hadn't paid a nickel on anything yet. So I carried 3 additional years of flood insurance before the buyout happened.
Oh, do we have a hand?
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Julie.
Just in relation to the point around as long as you have receipts, it won't be, the money you get from insurance won't be subtracted from the buyout. Is it like when I go online, there's a lot of I know it's been pretty clear, that messaging from Vermont Emergency Management, but online, it's a little less clear, you know, in the FEMA info. I wondered if there was a way, like I just, you know, have this fear of fixing up the house and then you know, somehow, is there somewhere that it could be in writing, I guess, for folks like myself who might fix the house up, even though we're going to do even if we do the buyout?
Yeah, so I'm not sure what you're looking at. The program requires this sort of review of the duplication of benefits. So I'm happy to have you follow up with me and we can take a look at what you've got. If you're confident, so normally we don't review your receipts and do the actual calculation for duplication of benefits until after we have an appraisal and we know you still want to move forward, because otherwise we have people drop out. Maybe you're not done with receipts.
Right.
We don't actually review it until after we have an appraisal in full. But if you want to shoot me an email and say, here's what I've got and get something in writing, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thanks.
If that's helpful. Yeah. And it's my team. So the state it's FEMA funding. The state manages the program, but we're the ones who do that review of the duplication of benefits.
Oh, okay. So it's,
FEMA's not doing the review. We're doing the review as a part of
oh, that's really helpful to know. I was thinking that it was the federal government that does the review of the duplication of services. Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
So even if you're located in the flood hazard overlay district, and so would qualify, my understanding from past presentations and conversations, that if you don't have a substantial damage determination or a history of a lot of insurance claims, that it would likely not be, or very unlikely be competitive for a buyout. Is that?
It depends. So I don't know if you have numbers yet on that, but the process, so we put everything from the town together. So there's 2 requirements to make it easy. It's not impossible otherwise, but the things that make it easiest for us to apply for buyouts are that the total project cost per first floor unit of how many we put together is below 360,000 total, and that they're in the special flood hazard area. And that's an average of it's the total project cost for all of the properties that we put together. So if the home values are high, that might not work. That's going to be the biggest challenge. It's going to depend on, we'll look at them as a set and see if we can make it cost effective to have them all together. That makes sense.
And so that might make something attractive for a buyout, or competitive for buyout, even if those 2 things did not.
Yeah, the benefits of one property, say someone has an extensive history of damages from several past floods, like maybe going back to Irene, and maybe 2019 and 2023, they would have a very high benefit cost ratio. And then on the flip side, say another property has nothing and it's just, you're inside the special flood hazard area, but you have an expensive property, those could even themselves out. So if you have a low BCR and someone else says, or there's a couple high BCRs, they could help pull up your neighbors to make the whole application move forward.
Benefit cost ratio. So what that means, so the BCA is a process, the benefit cost analysis that we have to go through if we're above that 360 to show FEMA that it's cost effective. And so looking at the properties in Richmond, the values are high, which does mean we are going to need past damage information. We'll have to figure out if we can get that to pass based on damages. So if you have damage, that's going to be better in terms of making that work.
And just a quick follow-up. So we're already in the system right now as one or the other, and we can't switch gears at this stage. Is that accurate?
Not necessarily, no. You could. Like, do you mean a buyout versus an elevation?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we have a pretty small team. Capacity is limited all around. We can only support one or the other. So if you're in as one and you want to change your mind, you can still tell us that now. We're not going to say you submitted it wrong before August 30th.
Is there any input from you guys about which program you ought to be in or have the best chance in?
Buyouts are the highest priority.
Okay.
And the funding is limited.
And elevations also have certain conditions based off if your structure is even capable of being elevated, or if you're at more of a risk.
On a slab, am I wasting my time even applying for this program, for elevation program? And we're getting out of buyout now. but
Brian may be
I'm
able to
kinda-
answer that
kinda
one
trying to
when we get
navigate
back,
the
yeah.
choice between buyout and elevation.
Can you just say that the 360 threshold, I didn't, for the whole project, what did you mean? As an average per house? Or
Yes. For the total project cost.
Total project?
Is that per
Per-
house in
per house.
Richmond?
It's per house in the application for buyout. So if we have 6 properties that want to do a buyout, we'll put you together in one application. And that full application has to be cost effective.
And that's every property from Richmond will get bundled up into one application? No.
Just, well, whoever wants to do buyouts. So if we have 6 buyouts, if we have 7 buyouts, they'll go in one application.
Oh,
If we can make that one application cost effective, if we can't, we might need to
Huh.
move things
Like
around.
if it makes more sense to pull out the substantial damage properties and submit them as one application, we'll do that, and then the other ones as another application, like
And the substantial damage, if you have that, those are automatically cost effective, so we don't have to prove cost damages necessarily. No.
correct.
Correct.
we do have Jess who has her hand up, or their hand up online. Go ahead, Jess. Robinson?
Yeah, just a quick question. I appreciate all these questions, but could someone just tell me deadlines and when, certain milestones need to be met and when the final application is in, et cetera? I'm interested in the elevation program specifically, but it'd be good to get those.
Yeah, so there's 2 different programs. Right now, the date, Brian, November 15th is what we're throwing out. Thank you. So November 15th is the deadline that we have right now. There's 2 different programs. One is this hazard mitigation grant program. One is called Swift Current. They both have early 2025 deadlines, but we need to be able to compile everything into applications together for either program.
And that's
Okay,
for
thank you.
application submitted by.
Yes. The buyouts are a little different because we're building the application, so we just need forms from you guys and then we'll build the application, but yeah.
Is there still a deadline for those, or?
I think November 15th is a reasonable mark. Let's aim for that.
I have a question about the forms. I get a little overwhelmed when I'm going through it. Lynn's been really helpful passing me and pointing me in the right direction. She suggested maybe to get a lawyer to kind of help, because there is some parts of the form, sub-grantor, who's that, what's your advice as far as people who don't go through the legalese and
My advice is set up a call with Matt
Yeah, I
and
mean,
talk through it.
If you're willing to, after this meeting, I can stay behind, and I brought 1 million copies of our form packets, so I could help go through what a buyout form looks like, so.
So if people are interested in buyout, it seems like their next best step right now is to start to fill out these forms, get that information in. And then is there a point where you would look at it and sort of like either approve it or not? And if it's not approved, could they, because some are looking at both programs, could they then say, okay, we'll look at the elevation because maybe I'd qualify for that? Like, I got the sense there was sort of like you would do a preview of it.
Yeah, so we'll take a look at it. We'll see if buyouts meet FEMA's requirements and you have all the forms in, they're going to FEMA. We're not holding them right now. So if we have everything and we can show that it's cost effective, they'll go right to FEMA. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. So I would make sure you have any past damage information that you can pull as to different floods and how much it cost. That's going to be incredibly helpful.
Say that you should have the zoning administrator, Tyler Misha, come and visit your property and get hopefully a substantial damage letter from him. Because there's people that are filling out the paperwork and then that hasn't been done yet. So that is the first step, period.
Given the low bar of 360 for these applications, and given Richmond's like property values just generally, substantial damage is by far the easiest way to get cost effective under this program.
Does the substantial damage take you out of the 360 cap? or
It
no?
Yes.
waives it entirely.
Then you don't need, FEMA automatically considers it cost effective
Automatically.
if you have substantial
But if
damage.
you don't have that, then then you get put into tranches of properties. And if somebody had $3.6 million for 10 houses, that would work, right? That's your math.
Yeah, we'd have to play a
Yeah,
PCA
yeah.
game to try to figure out
I get that.
how to,
So we'll
Make
take a
everything
look and we'll
fit,
crunch
yeah.
it on our end, but yeah, that sub dam is huge and absolutely. It would be important to look at that first. Agreed.
yeah, what's up?
Hey, so I'm actually new to all of this, and with this last 12 months, we did not receive substantial damage. But we did back with Irene and suffered, or went through the mitigations. Well, we didn't, we bought it after the fact. But the steps were in place.
You ready?
Foundations, new elevation. Does any of that work with us with determining if we decide to go with the buyout as well, being that we had, I mean, our house was, I think from what I'm being told, basically held up on one corner of cinder blocks before or after the effects of Irene.
So the property was elevated after Irene?
That's
and
what
then
I'm being told, yes.
Still received damage?
Yes, yeah, we had flooding in the last 12 months in the house.
Brian, have you dealt with that before? Elevated and then wanting to do a buyout? We haven't seen that to my knowledge, but.
Haven't really been interacting with folks in that situation, but I think there's more than one in this group based on the online as well.
Similar situation.
Okay, that's good to know. We can dig into that a little bit. Yeah.
Like we got a couple in the chat. Pre-calculated benefits for buyouts are eligible for someone. Okay, sorry. That's Brian typing back a response. Let's see. Does major damage also include the property? Our home was elevated after Irene. We have flooded 4 times since. Flood insurance does not cover the barn or property.
So does the, sorry.
The substantial damage is based off the house only. According to
Was that the question? Yes.
Okay, so then the answer is only the home does not, any damages to the property or the barn don't count.
Right.
Okay,
And yes,
Correct,
Chuck,
and that would
substantial
be
damage,
the
Brian's
same thing.
comment about the
Yeah.
pre-calc, yes, substantial damage means that is not required. The special flood hazard area is still required because you can't be sub-dam unless you're in the special flood hazard area, but it waives that 360,000 cost. Sorry, Brian, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna also speak to Elizabeth's comment. I think my guess is Elizabeth's interested in a buyout in this case. But for people doing elevations, like property damage doesn't qualify for damages in the benefit cost analysis. Neither does outbuildings, so barns, garages, ADUs, those types of things. So just to pass that along in case that's helpful for others.
any other buyout questions? We'll go on to elevations. If not, we can always come back to buyouts if there's questions that pop up later. But do we we have another
I
question?
just
Yeah,
had a
go ahead.
question. I know we can opt out after the appraisal's done.
Mhm.
Are you still
Yes.
looking at about a 10-month, 12, 13-month process, give or take?
Yes.
If for some reason you do have a change of heart or you go, I do want to stay here, maybe I do want to do elevation, is that time going to be passed? It basically by November 15th, you need to decide whether you're going buyout or.
So you can still not do the buyout, but you mean in terms of can you still do an elevation?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
was, you had to do one or the other.
So not under this funding round, but there will be more funding rounds. There are a couple of other programs as well. So I think that's part of the calculus, but no, you wouldn't, if you wait to do the appraisal, you will be out of time to apply under our current funding for an elevation. Yes.
Yeah, follow up to that about the timeline. I'm not sure what you're referring to with 11, 12 months. Maybe that was a previous presentation, but.
Yeah, so
What can we expect in terms of after November 15th?
yes, so once we have the forms back and we can compile the application, we'll do that on our end. We'll bring everything together. We'll send it off to FEMA for review. It can be 6 months to a year in FEMA review before we get an award. And until we actually get the notice of grant award, we can't start the appraisal process. We can't begin the project, which is the appraisal, the legal the closing, all of that.
So we wouldn't know what we would potentially get until more than 6, like around 12 months from now.
Potentially, yes. And we're working with FEMA because we're doing state managed, all of our projects look the same. So we're working very hard to make sure that they know exactly how to review all of our applications, that they're all completely consistent so they can review it as quickly as possible. It still is going to take a little bit of time.
We've got Julie online.
Yeah, so just as a follow-up to that, so if I'm understanding correctly, if I were to, let's say, apply for the elevation program, but I know that's more competitive. So if I applied for that and didn't get it, I assume then it's too late to then choose buyout. Is that correct?
If you're looking for a day before the storm value, yes, it will be too late. It would be in a future funding round, it would be a current market value.
Okay.
We also have a comment in the chat.
The timing on a buyout for substantially damaged homes in the special hazard zone with winter coming. Yeah, Chuck, unfortunately, that timeline is going to be for any properties, whether there's substantial damage or not.
You said 6 to 12 months, right?
Yeah.
Hi, folks. This is Harry Parker speaking. I wonder if there is a mechanism within Vermont Emergency Management or within FEMA to perform a retrospective analysis to see if a particular property has received previous payouts.
Yes. So,
and
sorry, were you done?
Go ahead. That's good news. How can I do that?
Yes, so I have access to what's called Pivot, which is a program that FEMA uses to keep track of any flood insurance claims. So if it was part of the National Flood Insurance Program, I can pull that data. I already have for Richmond, so we can use that in applications. So if it was, but that's only if it was a National Flood Insurance payout, specifically through that program. So if it's private insurance, if it's some other source, individual assistance, I can't pull. I can only pull flood insurance payments through the NFIP.
Thank you.
You were talking about different rounds of funding.
Yes.
What triggers the disaster declaration? What triggered that? So
Exactly. Yep. There's a couple of other programs as well. So Swift Current is tied to the disaster, but it's a separate program. We submitted a few projects under that last year. That's the first time we've ever used that program. It's brand new. But we just got awards on Friday, which is very exciting, including a few in Richmond. So we're hoping if we can get a few things through that process, it'll be faster. That is the criteria for that is a subset of what's eligible under the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. So that Hazard Mitigation Grant Program is the big pot that follows disasters that are declared. Swift Current is a small, fewer properties are eligible list, but it's specifically for properties that were substantial damage or have significant repetitive prior losses within the NFIP and have flood insurance. So they have to have had flood insurance prior to the most recent flood and flooded in 2024 because it's tied to that disaster.
We've got Doug on Zoom.
Hi, thanks. Oh. Sorry, technical difficulty.
Oh, are you logged in on your phone and on your computer?
Okay, are you able to hear me now? Sorry.
Yeah, that's better.
Two questions. Sorry if I missed it, but I understand the average is $1,000 with the tax for each property.
Doug, hold up.
And the second question is, if we were to sell the property, did the application follow property or the applicant?
Oh, there we go. That's better.
Okay, Doug, we've got you back, but please start over. Sorry, one more time.
Oh, no. Now he's muted.
Oh.
Doug, just unmute your computer.
That looks right. Go ahead.
My two questions are,
Better.
I
Good.
understand the average is 360,000, but is that the limit per property, the maximum we would get? And the next question is, if the property is sold through real estate, does the application follow the property or the applicant?
Both very good questions. So the 360, the offer we have to make to you is the day before the storm value. So it's not like FEMA will say you just get less if it's too high and we can't show it's cost effective. We can't submit the project. So we don't have a mechanism to offer you less to make it cost effective, if that makes sense. That was the first question, and now I lost the second one.
New owner.
New owner.
It's
Oh,
about
yes,
selling the
thank you.
property.
So if a new owner, you only have access to the day before the storm value if you're the property owner who was there at the time. If you sell the property, it is not, it would be a current market value and a new application.
Just so I'm clear, I think.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. The average is for buyout projects, average, not buyout and elevation projects.
Yes.
Yeah, elevations has its own number.
Maybe we should go to that now. We'll have elevations.
Right. All right, Brian, do you want to kick us off with a quick elevation intro and then questions?
Buyout stuff?
Well,
Go back.
we'll probably, I imagine we'll circle back
Okay.
with other questions. So I would encourage you to stick around if you have the time. We'll probably go to elevations for a while, but I'm sure there's going to be another bio question.
We'll still be here.
Sounds good. We'll make sure there's time after this to hear any additional questions. So just to give a couple of points of contrast of the elevation program versus the buyout program. So as similar to what Stephanie shared, it is voluntary for Richmond, who seemingly has agreed to do this on your behalf, and for you as an owner. So really at any time, technically either party could withdraw, basically until construction starts. Unlike buyouts, elevations are run by the town through an agreement with the owner. So, assume that you will have to have some sort of agreement for them to work on your property, to procure the services and contract the services and really oversee the project, which is different. Not everyone's comfortable with someone else working on their property, but that trust is a key part of how this will work. There was a question earlier about kind of what's the number for elevation. So assuming that everyone who's applying for an elevation is in the special flood hazard area, which I think I agree with Matt, everything I've seen has indicated that. If the project cost is, and I can type this in the chat too, if it's 228,000 or 228,000 or less per ground floor unit, so similar to what Stephanie said, if you have a duplex, you can double that number. If your elevation is that number or lower and you're in the special flood hazard area, then you are cost effective. If you're substantially damaged and that number is higher, let's say 250 that you need to elevate a home, it often does help you to become cost effective, but then we have to really look at either your historic damages that you can document, again, invoices, insurance claims, etc. Or alternatively, which is true for buyouts as well, we can try to project the damages in the future, which usually does require an engineer to be able to run sort of a hydraulic analysis. So we don't often get into that. It has been done in this program in the state and has helped in certain cases, but the standard is $228,000. So let's see here. A couple of things I also wanted to share that are maybe unique to homeowners and property owners is, at least in Richmond, some towns have different tax on this, but for the kind of initial work right now, often the homeowner is doing the legwork, getting things such as evaluations of their home, elevation certificates for their home to really know where you are at and compared to the river's base flood elevation, which is sort of considered the 1% annual chance of a flood. And where is your first floor of your resident, what kind of living space of your home? If that area is or things below it are kind of below 3 feet or 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So sorry, let's say that you have an elevation of 440 is the flood level. If your first floor and all utilities are above that level by 2 feet, then you're not really, you're not easily eligible in this program. But if you have damages, then we can look at it. So let's assume that you have a basement and utilities below that, where your first floor is below that. You do need to elevate all utilities and your living space to at least 2 feet above base flood elevation. You can go higher than that if an engineer will indicate that it's safe to do, as long as it's still cost effective. So just wanted to share that. But as you're collecting this documentation, like elevation certificate, engineering design, cost estimates, those types of things, if your project is awarded, then those costs can be re-incurred if they begin essentially the date of the notice essentially going out. So I believe for Stephanie that was like, I think July 14th for this 2023 flood when it actually got declared. So from that date forward, if you did engineering or design work or elevation certificates, you could get reimbursed if you're awarded the project. So it could be part of your scope and your budget. So similar to, I think, a question that I heard earlier, property owners do have to maintain flood insurance after the elevation. We would assume that the premiums would go down, but we don't work in flood insurance to guarantee that. So sometimes people have a great rate right now and maybe haven't been reevaluated in a while. But they do need to maintain flood insurance afterwards. Let me just stop there and see what questions there might be. And I think there was some chat, so I can look at those too. But
I don't see any new chats, but I think we.
they might have been on my Teams for my other work from my staff. Sorry, apologies.
Any elevation questions? Mary?
Yes, thank you. It's very cool. You said the elevation, Brian, was 228 max per unit. Does that have any bearing on what the value of the property is now?
It's not about the value of the property. It's about the cost of the project. So unlike buyouts, your home value is actually not directly factored into that. So just the project costs to lift the home, to elevate or relocate utilities, engineering costs, etc., are the costs that kind of go into that 228,000.
Thank you.
And like I said, if you have substantial enough damages, either determined officially or not historically, you may still be cost effective if you're above that. And similar to what Matt has shared, if we have 5 or 6 that are active and engaged, and we have some that are below and some that are above, we could try to average them as well to gain that same benefit.
Well, we participated in the buyout for Tropical Storm Irene, and the second property that we have, we replaced it. It was a mobile home. So are mobile homes eligible, ineligible?
For elevation, they are eligible. They have unique requirements for being secured to make sure once they're elevated that they don't drift away in the river.
Oh yeah, I've got the tie downs are right there now, but I've got the tie
Sounds
downs.
good. Yeah, just that will also be required. It's a little different than the other structures, but yes, those are eligible to be elevated. They're actually often very cost effective in the program, in my experience. So yeah.
Yeah, we had 2 fuel tanks with the last mobile home. They both tipped over, so we were a biohazard for a while.
Sorry to hear that.
Any other elevation questions?
What about a house on a slab?
Yeah, so there are different types of elevation. I think I've seen 4 different kind of generic types, and houses on slab can be elevated. It's just a different kind of option. But yeah, usually what I've seen slab on grade is like the home and the footings are lifted, or maybe they'll even re-pour the foundation as a part of it. I've seen information about that. I haven't worked on that many directly, but it would be essentially the key thing for us is that we're not, an engineering team. We're not going to tell you exactly how to elevate your home. We can give you guidance of sort of what the requirements are at a minimum. But this would be a key conversation to have with an architect or a structural engineer to say, hey, this is what I want to do. How can we do this to reduce my flood risk? So,
Brian, for a house on a slab, does the first floor need to be a certain level below base flood elevation? I think you said at least.
yeah, they all have
plus
the same requirement. So if the living space, which could be on a slab on grade, or it could be, a different type of house, as long as the first floor of that, or the main floor, is 2 feet or lower than sorry, base flood elevation plus 2 feet is what we're aiming for. So if you are below that, then you are eligible. If you're above that and you have damages, then you are also potentially eligible. So sometimes flood maps don't keep up, right? Sometimes flooding happens from things that aren't the river, right? So both can be eligible. It's a little bit more complicated. Did I answer your question, Josh?
Yeah, thank you.
A little complicated way of saying it, but I think I got there.
I understood. Thanks.
Thanks.
It sounds like you have to do a lot of this engineering and design legwork before you apply, right? I mean, looking at the application, there's a lot of blanks in there to fill out about those types of details. Are there resources available, other than hiring a structural engineer? Resources available for kind of doing cost estimation?
Yeah, good question. Stephanie, do you want to speak to that kind of generally, or would you like me to try?
Sure. The short answer is no, to some degree. We need an elevation certificate. We're going to need designs in order to be able to support the application. So if it's an eligible application, especially if it's Swift Current eligible, that program, again, if you have flood insurance and were more recently damaged, is going to be the best bet for elevations. And we can help build the actual application with you, but those are the pieces we're going to need, and we don't have the capacity to do that on our team.
So I thought in the Swift Current, is there another round of Swift Current right now?
There's another round.
Yeah.
Of
There is. Okay,
Yes,
I
so
don't.
we applied for, we did an elevation and a couple of buyouts last year.
Okay,
There's a new round.
that's open right now.
Yes.
Okay, because we just did the one that was due back.
Yeah.
Time.
It was due to FEMA in May. This one's due to FEMA in February. So I think that November 15th deadline is still
Okay.
appropriate.
Is that still 100% coverage on elevations for this round of Swift Current? I think this round of HMGP is 100% coverage.
The July 23 is, we're still trying to sort that out because
The Swift Current may not be.
it may not be. We're trying to figure out how much money we have right now.
Okay, and I guess sort of what
Because it's state dollars.
spurred my initial question is in the Swift Current round that we did back in the winter, I thought we had to have more detail on engineering for that application than we do for the current round. So what level of detail do you need for an application by November 15th for elevation? Do you need a full engineering workup of cost estimate, or I was under the impression that even a builder or a person who elevates homes could come out and give you an estimate, and you might be able to use something as simple as that for the application. But that's where I want to know more details.
I can share, before the actual applications came in and we saw the volume of projects that we were kind of trying to fund, we were hoping to get more elevations through the HMGP funding round, right, Stephanie? That was our intention and our hope. And the bar is lower for that program, Josh. Really what we needed was how high are you going, or do you want to go, and what's the cost, and then, put together the documentation about describing what you're doing, what your solution is. And we were going to be comfortable submitting with just that and attempting to see if we could get it funded that way. Swift Current is much more cut and dry. There's no phased project option where you can kind of do all of that pre-work ahead of time. So Swift Current does require 30% concept design, a structural inspection from a qualified professional, elevation certificates, and a clear documentation of the elevation that you're going for and how much it is in relation to the base flood elevation. So
Right, but that's for Swift Current, which wouldn't be due February.
It's not due November 15th right now.
I think what most people here are interested in is probably the November 15th and what those rules are. I don't even know how many new Swift Current was an option. Maybe I've been out of the loop.
Yeah, we're
Randy.
gonna be asking,
5 minutes
Mandeep's actually me helping with that within our team,
So-
but
Can you speak a little bit more to like, what does a homeowner need on that November 15th application for a cost estimate?
well, assuming that they were invited to continue forward, which we haven't sent many out. Assuming we're doing that, the key things will be a detailed scope of work, budget narrative with documentation of where the numbers came from. Often that comes in like a contractor's quote or an engineer's quote, combination of quotes. And then we would evaluate the benefit cost analysis. And then the last step, once we've sort of confirmed, yes, it's eligible and yes, the budget is, and scope are sufficient, would be the actual full application. So it's quite a bit to do. There have not been a lot of invitations sent out for elevations yet, and we're currently paused on sending more of them until we have further direction from our project review committee. So
let me, I guess I was also unaware there was an invitation needed to go out to move forward. We put in, we got everybody on the pre-application list by the end of August that wanted to be on the list. And that was a fairly simple thing to do. All right, oh, we do. Do we have those for our, okay, so you've been doing, okay, sorry.
For
I think we're in the
buyouts,
loop on
yeah.
that. So on the elevation, Lynn, you've been in contact and been communicating. Okay, great.
And the chat, just to level, the challenge we're having right now is that we probably have about $80 million federal share under the hazard mitigation grant program. So that's FEMA covers 75%, we're covering 25. So that's about 80 million of FEMA funding. We received $400 million worth of pre-applications. So that's the concern right now, is that funding is incredibly.
That's
tight.
just for elevation.
That's all projects.
That's elevation and buy.
Yeah.
Elevation.
most elevations didn't have a budget. So, yeah.
And right, so if an elevation didn't have a budget, they're not included in that
Right.
4 million right now. but
They're in the pre-apps, but yeah.
So the trick is, we haven't reached out to say apply yet, because I'm meeting with my project review committee tomorrow to have that conversation, because I don't want to tell you to apply for a program that I don't think we're going to be able to fund you for. So that's the place that we're in right now. So Swift Current is a better
Current's the
option.
next option.
And the next thing, it's a better funding option anyway, because the criteria is so limited that it's the best way for us to fund elevations right now, honestly. And so Mandeep and Matt have been working with the pre-application list to get all of the buyouts and elevations cleaned up so we can send them to FEMA to review. And then FEMA will tell us which ones are eligible for Swift Current. And then we will come back to you and say, these properties are eligible for Swift Current. We want to explore that route. So we haven't done that yet, which is why this is why it's new to you.
No, and Lynn's been more closer to it than I have. But you've been in touch with which applications we have on the pre-application, because I don't think we gave numbers on any pre-application. I think we just said they're interested, and we didn't weren't asked for numbers.
Yeah, no, and I've asked that from.
But that's where you guys are in communication and figuring that out. Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I need then. Great.
Yeah, we've paused any additional invitations to apply. A few have been sent out, but we've paused any additional until we have full direction from the review committee. I think we're meeting with tomorrow, right, Stephanie? So we might have more information, but kind of level setting is important. We're not sure elevations will get funded under this HMGP grant. So,
okay.
Julie had a question that I did want to speak to while I'm on it. It's about, this funding round versus the Swift Current and the match requirement. So we don't yet know about the match. Stephanie was sharing about that. Our baseline is 75%, is the kind of federal share, 25% is the non-federal share. There are cases where if your property is considered a repetitive loss or severe repetitive loss, you can actually be qualified for 90 or 100% federal share. So we would have to get the documentation to give you our final answer, but most properties are 75%. And there's one other indicator that we can use that's not very relevant to Richmond, is like the social vulnerability index can also sometimes bump a whole community up. And last year, at least, the evaluation was that it didn't qualify in Richmond. So it was 75-25. Stephanie, did you want to add anything to that or refine anything?
Nope, I think you got it. So when we get the list back, so when Mandeep and Matt are finalizing things, it'll go to FEMA. We'll tell you which ones are Swift Current eligible. When we do that, we'll be able to tell you what the cost share would be for each of them also.
Okay.
So most of them will probably be 75% federal, but we'll be able to tell you that when we reach out after we get that list from FEMA.
And right now, there's no, because right now the state is covering the 25% on the HMGP applications, but the state has not indicated they're gonna cover anything on the Swift Current.
We have some math and
Okay.
hand holding with our finance team to do.
So there's a potential the federal share goes up and there's a potential that the state covers part of it.
Yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
there is, but I can't.
Oh, we don't know
right
yet.
now.
Okay.
But I feel like in sum, with, excuse me, elevations, the more organized you are and the more actual numbers you have, the better off you're.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and it is, at your own risk at this point until you're awarded for any free costs that you put into it, but it also significantly improves your chance of being funded. So it's a risk. We'll do our best to help everyone and give you a clear sense of the likelihood as soon as we can.
All right. Any more elevation questions?
I think Julie had the same question in the comments.
I think he
That's what he was saying.
just saying for that question, I think. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so if I don't have paperwork, do I talk to you about getting paperwork to look at how to start the elevation process?
So we're gonna reach back out before we can do that because we'll have to send an invitation to apply. Which I think we're gonna be
I'm sorry?
waiting.
I haven't gotten one for your address, Mary. Yeah.
The invitation from the state to apply.
None of the new projects since the August 30th deadline have been invited to apply. So we're looking at it
You're
again.
saying my name's not on any list?
Your name is
You're
on the
the
list.
pre-application.
For the
Okay,
pre.
all right.
I'm not
Yes.
gonna be on.
Thank you.
Yes.
But we still have to abide by the November 15th deadline, even though we haven't been asked to apply yet.
We are, for what it's worth, we've asked FEMA for an additional 6 months and I'm hopeful that we'll get that, but I can't promise you that. So, yes.
Yeah, so, and I'll put it in the chat. I can show you where our current application process is kind of shown. So you're welcome to do these things if you'd like to. If you're interested in any potential elevation, regardless of how it's funded, you could start working on things while you're waiting. We just can't guarantee right now that you would get funding under this particular grant. So I'll share that with you in case you are curious about things you could be doing. I'm also going to post in the chat for future reference for those who can't see the chat right now. Just like the first sort of steps of elevation, if you want to do the technical kind of engineering type components. So I'll post that there in case that's helpful to folks.
Yeah. And Brian, I think if you could email that to Lynn and she could email that out to people that are interested in
Yeah.
elevation, that would be helpful because.
But again, getting a
Getting
letter
the-
of substantial damage is the first step. So
And
I
getting the
can't emphasize
invitation.
that enough because Tyler Mesha has not visited all of you
Yeah,
yet.
so you need the letter, you need the invitation, but I also know from helping on a Swift Current application, the elevation applications they take a lot of time. So getting a look at those applications now to start to understand like all the documents you need to grab, the estimates you need to have would be helpful. I think the earlier you can start to look at that and maybe don't spend money on an engineer yet, but you're going to need some document gathering to happen and that takes some time.
And probably the best thing, you could
An
do.
email that has all, so there's a whole list that the state has online. So Brian's gonna put that in the chat. Lynn will send that out to everybody. And you can go through that list and actually the Hartsfields helped, I think it was you guys to put together that checklist, which was super helpful for us. So maybe we
share it.
do something. If it's the same stuff, probably will, because I thought that was really helpful.
Colors for everything.
But they went through the Swift Current application and they put together a really helpful checklist as far as like, okay, homeowners getting this, the town needs to get that. It was super helpful. So if you want to cross-reference that, like I found that really helpful in that application.
You'll send that.
But there's still a lot of work
Yeah.
that the home to do. I don't want to, I want that to be clear because there's a lot and you guys know.
Yeah.
So do you got, I mean, is there somebody around who is doing like elevation certificates? I mean, is there any sort of specifics
That's a good
at
question.
all that maybe? I mean, after Irene, we had a guy in Huntington who basically went around to every single property and showed up and was like, here's your official elevation certificate, and the state paid for him to do it. Not that the state should do that again, but I mean, is there some, you know,
Not that I know of.
yeah.
I mean, you have to go to a surveyor, I guess, to get an elevation certificate.
Button
I was
surveyor.
gonna say,
Buttons
Yeah.
are- And then did it work out well for you, Mary?
So
They
Yeah.
did it.
yeah, they did the
yeah,
application.
they've done some work for
Not
us.
unfamiliar with it. He's originally from Richmond, so
Yeah.
he knows a lot of the properties around here.
Yeah, they know, they're good. The town uses them for other
Okay,
things.
okay,
So, I
so-
mean, not that I can make a recommendation, but
Right, right.
I would, yeah, they're
You're returning people's calls?
Yeah.
You know? We got a hold of Mary, all
I'll
right.
be able to give you the phone number.
Well, yeah, I know. I'm also- Yeah. I
If you just look
wanna
up Button Land Surveying online,
Okay.
they're usually pretty quick to get back, at least in my experience. Doug, yes, we're gonna put the recording, we'll put a link to it up online. And we'll email it out to all the property owners as well. It might take a day or so for MMC TV to process the recording, but we'll get that up online. So we have another question about property and barn are not considered part of the house for substantial damage purposes. Can you clarify whether leach field damages or vehicular access to the property are part of the home for substantial damages? It's just the house. So not the driveway, not the leach field, just the house, HD. Possible vendor list that the state has. Oh, okay. Brian, share some more links, so you'll be able to grab the chat from the documents in the meeting tomorrow. So yeah, we'll grab everything you're sitting here, Brian, put that in, and obviously you can email Lynn and we'll get that out. Maybe we'll try to set up, I think, something on the website too would be helpful with the links. I'm sure we can make a page for that. When is
Yeah,
the
just-
report?
Just to
Sorry,
make
Brian.
sure I quickly highlight what it is. So one of them is our contracts that the town has available for vendors. It's not curated based on surveying per se or structural engineers, but there might be some resources there. And then the second one is like, these are state ones for state services essentially, but you could use the list to be like, well, who's on there that does surveying, or who was on there that does structural engineer, who's on there as an architect that's been vetted by the state previously. So I'm not recommending anybody, which I'm not really allowed to do, but just a couple places to do some potential research.
Great. No, thank you, Brian. Julie has a question about EWP. I think they were supposed to send, so EWP is a separate program, not elevation, not buyout. They were looking at streams and rivers and possible mitigation of streams and rivers to protect property. They toured some sections of town and back on September 9th and 11th, 10th and 11th. I think that they were gonna have a determination within 2 to 3 weeks after that, so
Yeah,
I would
yeah,
think any day now.
Yeah.
To answer your question, Julie, and many of you here might also have been affected by the EWP program as well, especially if you're near a smaller stream or brook that overflowed. But we'll have a determination hopefully shortly. You're welcome, Julie. Okay, if that wraps it up, then I guess that wraps it up. Any future questions, please continue to go to Lynn. Lynn is sort of the pathway to the folks at the state. I mean, we have 20 properties to deal with. The state has what, 400 or something? Quite a few. So try to funnel your questions through Lynn. We'll make this available online as well. And then it sounded like there might be some people to follow up with Matt as well at the end of this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Mandeep.